All right. Looks like it's 6 o'clock on my watch, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Victoria Ortiz. I'm the Community Engagement Manager with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, or TRPA. And we are joined by some excellent members of our transportation team, which I will introduce here shortly. But before we get started, I just wanted to make sure you're in the right place. Tonight, we are going to be talking about Connections 2050, which is the vision for transportation here in Tahoe through 2050. So we're going to be talking about the Regional Transportation Plan. And this plan identifies a broad range of projects, programs, and strategies that are needed to comprehensively change and improve Tahoe's transportation system over the next 25 years. So this plan creates a vision for what those changes will be. And then you will actually see at the end, we have a survey so that we can get feedback from you as well. So we are hoping that this plan and all of the projects that would be a part of it would reduce congestion and improve Lake Tahoe's environment. So just so that you all know, this presentation is being recorded. We're going to ask that if you have any questions throughout the presentation, that you please pop them into the Q&A, which should be at the bottom of your screen. We'll have the panelists monitoring the Q&A, and we'll be sure to answer questions at the end of the presentation. We do have about a half hour of presentation for you, and then the rest of the time we can answer some questions. So with that, I will move us to our team. So you'll see this looks a little different from some of your other government presentations. We hope you enjoy it. We've created a different style of storytelling to try to get across the vision for this, and we've incorporated some of the characters here. So first up, we have Kira Richardson. She's a senior transportation planner, and you'll see above her, that's Ezra the Eagle, who you will hear about shortly. Next up, we have Ryan Murray. He's also a senior transportation planner, being shown here by Billy the Bear, who you will hear about. And last but not least, we have Michelle Glickert. She is the Transportation Planning Program Manager, and likely won't be presenting tonight, but is available to help answer any questions that you pop into the Q&A, and will be available at the end to help answer questions. So with that, I will let Kira take it away.
Great. Thank you, V, for the introduction. So again, I'm Kira Richardson. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Today, I'm going to walk you through this first part, and then I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Ryan Murray. So just to start, we developed the Regional Transportation Plan around a set of goals and policies. So there are 6 primary goals, and every transportation project will meet at least one of these goals. So first and foremost, safety. We want to make sure that our transportation system is safe for all different users. Next, mobility. Mobility independence and ensuring that everybody can get where they need to go is really central to this plan. Environment, I think many of you would all agree that the environment is really central to our Tahoe identity. And so protecting it and reducing greenhouse gas emissions is a key part of this plan. Next, we have prosperity. If we have an equitable and efficient transportation system, that will help us foster a strong economy and strong community. And so that's really a big part of this planning effort. Next is resilience. When we can, in the face of climate change, ensuring that our transportation system is resilient and sustainable is really important. And so this would apply to making sure that our transportation system is resilient in the face of climate change, but also that it can be sustainably funded over the long term. And then lastly is performance. Making sure that we have a dynamic, reliable, and efficient transportation network is really important, and ensuring that we can adjust when necessary, when there are new modes, for example, is also a key part of this. Next slide, please. So we mentioned in the beginning a little bit about the Regional Transportation Plan. And we update the regional transportation plan every 4 years. And in between those updates, we work on several other plans with input from the public that ultimately also informs this plan. So in addition to developing a regional transportation plan that meets our transportation goals, we'll also utilize public input to guide the planning process. And here we just wanted to highlight the amount of input that we've received over the last 4 years in between our last regional transportation plan update and this one, because it really is a significant amount of input that we've collected. And we do keep track of all the input we collect, and we utilize all of it in our plan development. So if you've ever filled out a survey for us or commented on a plan or come to a workshop or a webinar, just know that we really do appreciate it, and your feedback really is guiding us and the decision makers through this RTP update. Next slide. So we utilize our transportation goals and public input to guide our planning, but then we also use data. And this is very much a data-driven plan at its core. There's a lot more data that goes into this plan than what's shown on the slide, but I wanted to highlight this specifically because I think it's really important in how we think about travel at Tahoe. And it's also very unique to Tahoe because Tahoe is not a typical city, which means that we can't always rely on the same types of transportation strategies that cities would rely on. So this graph is showing the estimated trip distribution by trip type. We categorize trips into 3 different trip types. So we have everyday trips, which are trips that you and I would make to work, school, grocery store, some of those like basic trips that we're making every single day. And then we have recreation trips, which are all trips to recreation sites or for rec purposes. So that would be going to the beach, the ski resort, or maybe even going gambling at a casino. And then lastly, we have those in and out of basin trips. So these are all the trips that are ending or beginning outside of the basin. So somebody coming from Reno into the basin or vice versa, or somebody traveling through the basin. And this data is really important because when we have different transportation strategies in our regional transportation plan for these different trip types. And then you can also think about these sort of in layers. And what I mean by that is that in a perfect world, we would have endless amounts of money and we'd be able to just implement all the different projects that we have planned in this plan. But that's not where we are. So we have to build up our system incrementally. So we'd start with transportation strategies and projects that help people make those everyday trips. And then we'd move into implementing projects that help people get to recreation sites. And then finally, we'd move towards serving those in and out of basin trip types. So that's a general framework and a way to think about it. Next slide. So with our planning approach in mind, let's dive into the actual plan and talk about the 2050 vision for Tahoe's transportation network. So the map on the right shows our transportation vision in 2050. So it's a lot, there's a lot happening on that map, and it might be a little bit tough to visualize just by looking at that map. And we thought it might be a little bit easier and more fun to show the 2050 transportation system through the eyes of one of its users. So this is Billy the bear. We introduced her at the beginning. And throughout this presentation, we are going to transport you all to the year 2050 and walk through a day in the life of Billy the bear as she moves around the basin. Next slide. So let's start with the transit vision. So we're transporting you to the year 2050. Imagine you're there with us. And today is Billy's friend, Ezra the Eagle's birthday. So she is traveling from Tahoe City to South Lake Tahoe to spend the day with him. So Billy takes TART Connect, a free microtransit service from her den in the mountains down to the nearest Tahoe City bus stop. She looks up and sees that the next bus to South Lake Tahoe is coming in 10 minutes. It's easy for her to know when the next bus is arriving and where it's heading, thanks to the electronic boards showing real-time estimated arrival times and destinations. It's free to ride the bus, so when a sleek electric bus pulls up right on time, she boards alongside several other passengers. So our transit vision for 2050 is a system that is that has local buses that are free to the user, frequent, accessible, and reliable. There are connections around the region. There's real-time transit information, electric buses, and safe and accessible shelters. Next slide. But we know that that's not really where we're at right now. So it's not all bad news. We do have free local transit. All of the fixed route services in the basin right now are free to the user, and the microtransit is free to the user. We also have microtransit. That's something that's new. We have TART Connect on the North Shore and Lake Link on the South Shore, but we still don't have any connections between North Shore and South Shore. And we've heard from a lot of people that the routes are not frequent or reliable. And so we're not quite where we want to be with transit yet. Next slide. And so as we think about how we can make our transit vision a reality, we're utilizing our 3 planning approaches that I mentioned earlier. So our transportation goals, our public input, and data. And I'm just going to quickly highlight some data here, because when we think about how and where to make improvements to the transit network, data is particularly important. So these 2 maps are highlighting seasonal trip activity. So the left map in orange is showing trip activity in July, and then the right shows trip activity in the winter in February. And so the maps don't look exactly the same, which just means that when we plan transit, we might have routes that will go to beaches in the summer and then ski resorts in the winter. And it's also important, I think, to highlight that regardless of the season, you'll notice that a lot of the trips are happening in town centers. And so we need to make sure that our town centers have sufficient transit services for people to make the trips they need to make year round. Next slide. Okay, so if you remember Billy's, she's on the bus from North Shore to South Shore to meet her friend Ezra. So Billy's bus has pulled into the transit center at South Lake Tahoe Y, a vibrant town center. Ezra, the eagle, did not own a car, but it was easy to walk or fly to the restaurant from both his house and the transit center. Quaint shops, local markets, and charming cafes line the streets, creating a bustling community where residents and visitors alike could walk around safely and visit local businesses. Thanks to TRPA's policy changes, affordable housing like Ezra's was prioritized in town centers so that he could get to grocery stores, restaurants, and medical care without a car. So our vision for towns in 2050 are town centers that are walkable, bikeable, and have mixed use development with affordable and workforce housing. Next slide. But once again, we're not quite there yet. So the reality is that we do have a lot of affordable housing under construction, which is great. So this photo is showing the Sugar Pine Village, which is under construction near the South Tahoe Y, and that should be completed soon. And then we also have a couple of mobility hubs that are have either been built recently or are being planned and built soon, located around the region. But we still have a lot of Tahoe workers who can't afford to live in the basin, and so they're commuting from out of the basin, which is really driving up our trips. And then we still need more mobility hubs around the region to truly connect our transit. And with that, I am going to say next slide and pass it off to my colleague, Ryan Murray.
Thank you so much, Kira. Okay, so here we are popping back into the 2050 vision with our Tahoe friends here. So after lunch, Billy and Ezra decide to meet their friend Lola the Lahontan cutthroat trout at a nearby trailhead for a hike. Billy rents a bike from a nearby shop, and Ezra uses an app to unlock an e-scooter. Pedestrian-friendly crossings, plus separated sidewalks and bike paths, and responsible speed limits make it safer for walkers, bicyclists, and drivers to safely get around. There has not been a serious injury or fatality on Tahoe's roadways since 2045. Even in the winter, pedestrians and cyclists stay safely separated from vehicles thanks to regularly plowed sidewalks and paths. Thanks to this infrastructure, Billy and Ezra cruise through the town worry-free. That safety vision for Tahoe includes those safe pedestrian and bicycle facilities and crossings that are built into the streets for all users to feel safe traveling by any mode. And in line with our Vision Zero safety strategy, there are now 0 roadway fatalities. Next slide, please. So the reality with safety, there's some good news. Tahoe's fatality rate is lower than average. 200 miles of bike and pedestrian facilities have been improved since 1997. But Tahoe still averages 5 fatalities and 20 serious injuries annually, as well as 105 of those miles, roadway miles, are high stress for bicyclists. And so next slide for me, if you will. And so continuing in that data-driven approach, just to dive into that stressway analysis, for the recent active transportation plan, we underwent a study that identified high stress, both roadway segments and intersections around Tahoe. And these are high stress for cyclists specifically. The thinking behind this analysis is it not only helps our local planners and engineers identify high stress roadways, and these are characterized by things like vehicle speeds, the presence of a shoulder or a bike lane, intersection design and type, and how we can maybe reduce the stress of that roadway and encourage more people beyond Ezra and Billy to walk, bike, or roll to their destination. Another feature this has of these analyses is also making our grant writing, our regional grant writing, more competitive by codifying or doing like a more quantified analysis of those roadway segments, and then identifying the roadway characteristics that we can change or improve to reduce the stress of that roadway. So it makes us more competitive in grants, as well as encourages more people to walk, bike, or roll when those roadway segments and intersections are less stressful. Next slide, please. So back to 2050, the vision here of trails. Billy and Ezra meet Lola the Lahontan cutthroat trout at the trailhead to Tahoe Mountain, which features disabled parking, serviced trash cans, and bathrooms. Lola, Billy, and Ezra enjoy a lovely afternoon winding through the towering pines to breathtaking views of Lake Tahoe and the Desolation Wilderness. This trail's vision is, of course, the Tahoe Trail, a connected bike path around the entire lake. But also we want connections from the lake specifically to the other recreation destinations such as trailheads and beaches, and then paths that then connect to town centers with the aforementioned low-stress roadway segments that can carry people safely from their homes or what we call utility trips, whether that be a doctor's appointment, work, children going to school, or any trips, and even walking or biking to a transit stop and making that connection there. That is the trail's vision. Next slide for me. And then back to today, we have the trail's reality. Currently, we have 61 miles of shared use paths, 46 miles of bicycle lanes, and 29 miles of sidewalks, which we're all really proud of and folks have worked super hard to implement. But the reality is also that we have 0 miles of Class 2 and Class 4 bikeways. Really briefly, Class 2 is what's considered a buffered bike lane, and this is just paint on the road that offers a little bit of distance separation between the travel lane of automobiles and the bicycle lane. That's the buffer. And then Class 4 bicycle lanes, which is also a protected bike lane, which is something that is separated by what's called vertical separation. These could be things like flex posts or bollards, planters, or even concrete curbs that help protect and reduce the stress for cyclists, encouraging more people to walk, bike, or roll. And then, of course, we have 55 miles of Class 1, which is what is depicted in the picture there. It's a shared use path. And 27 miles of sidewalks and complete streets are planned, but design and construction in Tahoe is very expensive and can take a long time. So we have a lot of planned projects, but we need a lot of community support and we need a lot of funding to get these projects moving forward. Next slide, please. And of course, always coming back to the sort of balance between community feedback and that data-driven approach. On the left-hand side here, you see the increase year over year on electric bicycle usage. Especially with Tahoe's topography and terrain, electric bicycles have become quite a game changer, both whether it's physical ability related or just ease of getting around town. Helps people get out of cars and make more trips using an electric bicycle. So encouraging those usage. And also that's why it's important to reduce the stress of the roadway so that we can help get vehicle separation between electric bicycles and perhaps pedestrians who want to use the shared use path or the sidewalk without faster moving devices going around them. And then on the right-hand side there, you have a heat map graphic that depicts the Lime scooter trips. That's the shared mobility, those rentable scooters that are pretty prevalent in South Lake Tahoe. And I want to note, it might be hard to read there, but there's just north of 140,000 trips were taken between May and October of 2022. So not only does this chart here or this map help us see where people are going and how often, but just the sheer volume of trips taken really shows that this mode is important, helps people get to where they're trying to go, and then really highlights the importance of reducing the stress of those roadways so that we could perhaps double that number and really get both residents and visitors to their destination safely. Next slide, please. So back to the 2020-50 vision. When they get back to the trailhead, it's well into the afternoon and Billy needs to get back to her den on the other side of the lake. Lola also lives near Tahoe City and offers her a ride in her electric vehicle. Billy checks Google Maps and sees that it's just as fast to take public transit as it is a private vehicle. Now that Tahoe has coordinated traffic signals and bus-only lanes, it's often cheaper, easier, and more convenient to take public transit. But Billy opts for extra time with Lola and decides to carpool back to the North Shore. Lola then finds a nearby electric vehicle charging station, and once they're charged up, they cruise back to the North Shore. So again, going back to that vision we have for 2050, the technology vision is comprehensive electric vehicle charging, both electric vehicles for automobiles and also public. We heard a lot about public electric bicycle charging stations as well. As Kira mentioned in the transit section, those real-time transit message boards that let you know where transit is a part of the technology vision. Also real-time parking information, letting folks know that, hey, perhaps your destination at a particular beach or a particular recreation destination will let you know real-time from your phone or computer that the parking is full. So maybe you choose to go to a destination that is less impacted. And then mentioned the coordinated traffic signals that help encourage people complying to the speed limit and not needing to stop and start as much through town centers. All of these coordinate into that technology vision for 2050. Next slide, please. But we have the technology reality. We do have new parking reservation systems that were just implemented this summer, and EV charging is expanding. But recreation-based parking can still be quite difficult, as we're well aware around Tahoe. EV charging can still be sparse, or just simply getting the utility to various areas of Tahoe due to topography can be challenging. And then, as I mentioned before, whether that's real-time transit information or real-time parking information, a lot of these services rely on cellular coverage or broadband coverage. So the gaps in those networks can make it very difficult for people to, or for, I should say, locals to implement these technologies that we're looking to support. Next slide for me. All right, so next steps. Coming up on the development of the regional transportation plan, the timeline is we look to have a public draft available by spring of 2025. That public draft will be released to the public, and that will give folks an opportunity to comment on the plan as a whole. And then we're looking to go to our board for their consideration of adoption summer of 2025. Of course, we encourage you to sign up for the TRPA's transportation e-newsletter, both to receive information on that public draft and when we're going to our board. But also we have a host of public outreaches coming up over the next 2 months that everyone here and beyond is welcome to attend, where they can hear this presentation again, ask more detailed questions, and perhaps meet us in person as well. And of course, with the next steps, what we were talking about with all these visions that we have is the funding outlook. Suffice it to say, construction at large is not cheap, and it is especially not cheap in Tahoe. So we're looking at over $2 billion in projects over the next 25 years. Now that number averages out to $100 million a year. That doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be building $100 million of projects every year. That number is obviously could shift quite a bit depending on funding opportunities. But we really need to identify what projects are the priorities for the region, and where we spend those dollars is really important on getting these projects in the ground. Next slide for me. So that takes us to our regional transportation survey. The survey is a really fun exercise where it's a funding prioritization exercise. So you, just like Ezra and Billy and Lola, are fictitious creatures who are getting around Tahoe. You, in this survey, are awarded a fictitious $500, where you can then allocate those funds to a host of projects that we've lined up that all tie into these categories that Kira and I just went over. And then you can help prioritize what gets funded. Let us know what are the things that are important to you. All the dollar amounts are fictitious. It's kind of designed to be a fun exercise, but it's also to highlight that we don't have money to fund all the projects. I certainly don't have $2 billion sitting in my pocket. So understanding where we can best spend those dollars, where the public wants us to best spend those dollars. And by us, I mean the region and the local implementers, but where we can best leverage these projects to achieve our goals in Tahoe, we want to hear from you. So that QR code will take you to the survey, as well as our RTP website, trpa.gov/connections2050. And then, of course, at any time throughout this process, you can email us at rtp@trpa.gov. Give us feedback at any point in time. I'm going to kick it back over to V, where we can have a Q&A session. But again, if you think of something, if you leave this meeting tonight and you think of something again, feel free to email that email and we'll be happy to respond. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan and Kira, and thank you all for listening. Before we pop off our Q&A, I did want to do a quick poll so that we can get a sense for who's listening. So I'm going to launch the poll now. Hopefully you all see it, but we're just asking where you live the majority of the year. So you should be able to click. I'll give you another 10 seconds or so. And if you can just let us know where you live, that gives us a sense for who's listening tonight. And as Ryan mentioned, we do have a lot more presentations that are planned throughout the course of this process. And as you saw in the timeline, we will be continuing with this throughout this fall, into the winter, and really into the summer of next year. So there is still ample opportunity to share your feedback. That survey is really the best point for you to be able to help us prioritize which projects you think should be included in Tahoe's transportation future. So I'm going to end the poll and I will share the results with everybody here. So it looks like the majority of folks are from El Dorado County, and then we've got a good smattering all around the lake here. Interesting that everyone is a resident. So thank you very much for joining tonight. I hope that this has been really entertaining. We do have one more poll for you that's really more for us. We want to see how you enjoyed this new style of presentation. So I have one more here that is also to share your favorite character. So let us know what you think. If you like this new style of the vision for Tahoe's transportation future, we want to make sure it's really easy to understand, because oftentimes I think sometimes we lose a little bit with the technical jargon. So I'm really hoping that you all enjoyed this style. I'll give it another 5 seconds or so here in case people want to join in. All right, and then I'll end the poll here, share the results. Billy the Bear is a strong contender here. You know, she is the main character, so I understand that. Kira, I'm sorry. Ezra the Eagle is her favorite, so it might come as a little bit of a blow for her. So stop sharing the results here. And I see someone already put well, Helen, thank you so much. Helen's listening in tonight. She said it was great fun, nice work. But I do want to just share, if anyone has a Q&A, any questions, please pop them in the Q&A. We are here, we're a little bit early, actually quite early. It's 6:30, and really the rest of the time is meant for us to be able to answer any questions you have. I know we just threw a lot at you. So feel free to pop any questions that you might have in that Q&A, and we've got an expert team here to help answer any of them. Great. So Nick just added a question in here that said, what are the plans for microtransit versus fixed route transit? Kira, that might be a good question for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, it's a good question. So for those of you who might not know, or maybe everybody does know, because we do have microtransit and fixed route around the entire basin. Microtransit is an on-demand, door-to-door service. Typically, it's run with vans that can carry about 10 passengers at a time. And then fixed route transit is a set schedule with a larger bus. And those are on specific routes. They don't deviate from the routes at all. And so both types of transit are important in the regional transportation plan. And the way that we think about it is that we can't really have microtransit without fixed route transit. So fixed route transit is central to how we're talking about, or how we will achieve our goals and our vision for 2050. And so our goal and our vision for fixed route transit is really high frequency transit along our main arterial. So this would be like Highway 50 along the South Shore, Highway 28 along the North Shore, Highway 267 and 89. And high frequency would be every 15 to 20 minutes, we'd have a bus going by. And then for microtransit, I think that the way that microtransit is operating right now is sort of aligns with what our vision for microtransit would be, in that microtransit is separated into several zones. So there's and that acts sort of as a feeder service for the fixed routes. So that's the goal, is that microtransit can help you make your first and last mile trip. But I think there's a little bit of work to do because some of the services aren't integrated. And I think some people are maybe utilizing microtransit to make their entire trip, even if it were a really long trip, like several miles. And so that would be the goal, or the vision for 2050 would be where microtransit is feeding into the fixed route service. It's helping you make those first and last mile connections, but that our fixed route service is really providing major service and getting people primarily where they need to go. So sorry, a little bit of a roundabout answer, but that's it's complicated. There's a lot to it. There's a lot I could say.
No, I think that's perfect. And we actually just had another question come in that's very related to that, Kira, where someone was saying, will we be incentivizing public transit and discouraging microtransit? So hopefully that last bit of her answer there helped to answer that question for you, Niobe, which is essentially that we do really want to encourage public transit to get people to main areas. And then that microtransit helps fill in that last gap. So getting them, say, from the bus stop to their house. Or in the case of this story for Billy, it was getting her from her den in the woods over to the mobility hub in Tahoe City. So hopefully that answered that question. Anything to add to that, Kira, before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, just to add a couple things to that, but that was a great description. I don't say that we would discourage microtransit, because when the system works together, when you have high frequency fixed route transit and then limited microtransit in specified zones, it can really work well. And we can see, and we'll see people, or a higher percentage of shared rides on microtransit. And so I think that's the vision. There is a little bit of work to do, but also it's only our third year of running microtransit, and I think we've had a little bit of growing pains, and we also don't have as high frequency transit as we'd like to have on our main streets. And so if we can get the frequency up, get the systems integrated, I really do think they could work together well. And so that's the vision. We don't want to discourage microtransit, and also microtransit I think can be sometimes a gateway for people into regular fixed route transit. If they see that microtransit is working well for them, they would likely be they're more likely to hop on a regular bus.
Great. Thank you, Kira. This next question is related to trails. So Ryan, I think that's going to be for you. And this question from Daniel is asking, about the difference between shared use trails as multi-use trails, and maybe what you can describe as a little bit of what are we talking about when we say trails? I think you're going to love this question because he loves being precise here. So when we say trails, are we talking about paved? Are we talking about equestrian trails and mountain bike trails? How are people going to get to transit centers? And what do we mean by trails and how they connect to transit?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And I just want to have a disclaimer at the outset. This was my first time presenting this presentation. So as I've more finally honed this, your questions are really helping me get to sharpen that edge. But yeah, for our RTP specifically, what we mean by trails are those multi-use paths, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, sort of what we call on-street network, or street adjacent, like a sidewalk, or essentially paved trails are what we're talking about here. It's I don't know if you noticed, but we had a really nice sort of T alliteration with that transit and technology and towns and trails. So trails for our purposes mostly talks about those paved either off-street or on-street network of active transportation facilities. Now, that is not to say that it wouldn't be great. We do have a comprehensive trails plan, and that is the DIRT, or I'm sorry, a trail strategy, which is a DIRT single track type trail network. And it's fantastic if those are interconnected as well. But I would say for our regional transportation planning purposes, mostly when I'm referring trails in the context of this presentation are those active transportation facilities. And again, I appreciate you mentioning that because I want to make a mental note to make sure I highlight that in future presentations.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Ryan. This next question is more about connecting out from outside of the Tahoe region into Tahoe. So Kira, can you speak to any ideas that are in the works to expand regional transit? So getting from, say, Sacramento or Bay Area or even Reno, Carson to Tahoe without a car?
Yes, great question. And this is definitely a huge part of the transportation plan and the long-term plan. So there are a couple of different services already. There's two different airport shuttles, one that connects people from the Reno airport to North Lake Tahoe, and then one that goes from Reno to South Lake Tahoe. And then there is an existing bus service that goes into Carson City and Minden and Gardnerville, but it's not super sufficient. Oh, and then there's also a bus that goes once a day from Sacramento into South Lake Tahoe. So right now we sort of have like skeleton service into and out of the basin. And the goal is definitely to increase the amount of service that we have, especially from the Bay Area or Sacramento, Stockton into the basin, because we know that that's where a lot of our visitors are coming from. However, until we have core services within the basin so that when people get here without their car, they can get around here without their car, we won't really be able to build that system out to where we want it to be. So I talked in the beginning sort of about that layered approach, the different trip types. And in there, you'll see that about over half of our trips are everyday trips. So these are trips that are happening in the basin to work, school, grocery store. Next are recreation trips. And then lastly are in and out of basin trips. And so the way that we think about it in terms of planning is let's get our house in order first. Let's build up and serve those everyday trips and make sure that people can get where they need to go within the basin. And then we can start talking about those in and out of basin trips and getting people here without their cars. So it's sort of a chicken before the egg scenario, but it's definitely part of the plan. There's lots of ways we could make it work, lots of funding proposals to make it work. And it's definitely a part of our long-term vision and helping us reach our goals.
Great. And follow-up question to that was, what is the cost of the airport shuttle and the other transits into the basin? So I just did a quick Google for the South Tahoe Airporter. It is $32.75 one way for an adult, and round trip is $59.50. And then for children, it's a lot. It's about half of that.
And then the cost in terms of like running the services. I don't know how much the airport shuttles cost because they are private services. And so it's hard to say. I could estimate, but yeah, the North Shore shuttle is about over $100 for a ticket.
And again, that's a private service, correct, Kira? None of these are.
The North Shore shuttle is actually operated publicly. And I don't have those numbers offhand, but we could definitely get back to you on the cost of that service.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all available at linkingtahoe.org. So for those who aren't familiar with it, that's a great website that has a lot of different information about how to get around Tahoe, either while you're here or even getting to Tahoe in different ways. So that should have links to those airport shuttles. And Michelle, I saw you raise your hand, so feel free to jump in.
I just wanted to sort of also talk about something that we see as another regional connection, which is Truckee and the rail system. So one of the things that TART provides is a nice connection to a little bit of passenger rail service today. TRPA, along with several other partners, such as Placer County and other MPOs from the Reno area, from SACOG, which is Sacramento MPO. So we all get together and we are working on how we can improve passenger rail to Truckee. And then that means we have that instant transit connection already in place today. Additionally, how we could build up that support locally for this too. So we'll be talking a little bit about that in the regional transportation plan. Truckee is outside of our region, but that doesn't mean we don't work with them. So I just wanted to bring up that that's also a nice regional connection for us.
That's a great point. And don't go too far away, Michelle, because I think this next question will actually be for you. And that is, how much of the estimated $2 billion that all of these projects would cost is actually available right now? And what strategies are in place for obtaining the rest?
I would have to say, so how the regional transportation plan works is we take snapshots in time, like a 5-year look, 15, and then like the large 2050. So we can probably, I wouldn't have offhand like the number that's available of that 2 billion. What we're looking at here is how much money we have estimated over that 25 years of planning, that 25-year vision. And so we look at all these various sources. And you can look at our last RTP if you really want to dive into the details. Every funding source is identified there. So right now, we probably, the best document, and it's actually out, I think right now for public comment, is called the Federal Transportation Improvement Program. And so that has a host of projects in it that are underway, either under construction, being planned. So that's another opportunity for comments. That document is one of those financial, documents that we use to help us also look for that 25-year vision. So I think I was just getting some help in the answer here. And that was looking at that 5-year kind of short-term vision. What was that? Is about, we're projecting about 600 million in that first 5 years of our plan. But to be honest, again, the regional transportation plan is the vision. The Federal Transportation Improvement Program is that look, a 5-year look at. And right now it's, like I said, posted and available public comment. And that is about $642,000. So that'll give you a little bit of a preview of what we have right now in our next 5 years.
Just to clarify, at the end, you said $642,000. I'm assuming.
642, right? Is that what
you said? Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure we were talking 100,000s.
Yeah.
Great. And if anyone's interested in finding that FTIP, if you have trouble, it should be on the trpa.gov website. But if you have trouble finding it, you can again contact rtp@trpa.gov, and we're happy to direct you to that document.
And we'll be diving more into that financial element. As Ryan said, that's next, right? So we're getting our host of projects, we're looking at potential funding sources, and now we're going to then kind of marry them up, and that'll be the draft regional transportation plan.
And Michelle, I think you did mean 642 million, not 642,000.
Yeah, sorry. Where's Judy Weber? Forgive me. It came on and let me clarify. Yes. That's right. I'll drop it. Is it possible I can put it in the chat?
Yeah, go ahead and throw it in the chat once you find that number. And again, feel free to throw any more questions you might have in the Q&A. We really appreciate the engagement and back and forth here, everyone. One other question Niobe asked that I feel like is a great ending point here, unless others have more questions. But she said, how do we get this info out to folks so that they take these options? And I would say one of the best resources is Linking Tahoe that we mentioned. So I would definitely direct people there. But another piece of it is just getting them engaged and feeling like they're contributing to the future of Tahoe's transportation vision. So I really hope that all of you will not only take the survey that we linked in the chat, but also have with the QR code here. I hope that you'll also share it with your family, with your friends, with other folks, since we know that it's residents who are listening here today. This is a great thing to share with your neighbors. What would they like to see? You'll notice that we have estimations of what things might cost. And obviously nothing's going to cost $500, but we just wanted to make it easier than saying the annual budget for this is going to be $2 billion and adding all those zeros in there. So we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. But again, let us know what you think of the survey. If you have any questions at any point throughout this process, please email us at rtp@trpa.gov. And again, thank you for all of your time and engagement this evening. We really appreciate it. And let's see here. Michelle did just confirm that it was $642 million, not $642,000.
In the first 5 years of our regional transportation plan.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sorry.
Great.
Sorry for any confusion.
No problem. So as we said, we will be sure to, this has been recorded. We'll be sure to put it up on our website. Our website is trpa.gov/connections2050. So please share this with everybody. And thank you again for your time, but we will give you back about 15 minutes of your evening. Thanks again for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Bye.